TV game shows. They used to be an almost integral part of our lives, didn't they? They were the average person's connection to this glorious world of media, the doorway through which any one of us could have a chance of being broadcast to the nation. This was before the days of YouTube or even the internet, and really, the thought of being on one of our 4 terrestrial TV channels was the peak of excitement. Of course, the vast majority of the population never appeared on a show, but it didn't mean we took any less pleasure in seeing our fellow neighbour battling against other normal people.
The category is Science. Select.
2, please.
Perhaps to win a caravan, or maybe somewhat of a lesser prize.
3. For hour after hour of family fun, a croquet set. 2. Home
Ooh, a
accounts
Commodore
are as simple
64.
as 5
That's not
with this
bad.
home computer.
But if our chances of getting on these shows themselves was low, what was the next best thing? Well, that's where computer adaptations step in. Adaptations of these shows. I mean, if you could play it on your Spectrum with your family, you were essentially on the TV anyway, and for just a few quid per game, there was nothing to lose. Or was there? Here I'm going to sample the delights of 4 such games, ranging from the kids TV series Knightmare through afternoon viewing of Countdown, the evening viewing of Krypton Factor, all the way to the weekend excitement of Run the Gauntlet. As these are decidedly British TV shows, we'll need the most British of machines, a ZX Spectrum, and a decent amount of tea to get us through. Right, let's get cracking.
Welcome, Watchers of Illusion, to the Castle of Confusion.
A welcome break from another cherished CITV show, Funhouse. Knightmare was a game show which ran from 1987 to 1994, feeding the fantastical imaginations of British kids, and probably adults, throughout its 112 episodes.
Squiredom is the reward for surviving the dungeon, for silver precedes gold.
I remember getting back from school, grabbing a suitable snack, and being riveted by the action and adventure unfolding before my very eyes. The premise was pretty simple. 4 lucky hopefuls would find themselves in Treguard's castle. One of these intrepid folk would then need to don the helmet of justice and enter the dungeon of despair, where they were confronted by room upon room of computer-generated graphics, which were made on various machines including an Amiga 2000 and Space Ward Supernova. There were also real-life obstacles and actors within the blue screen environment. Now, clearly the Dungeoneer couldn't see the superimposed graphics, so the hat also acted as a blindfold, only allowing the adventurer to peek out of the bottom and collect items. The other 3 contestants would act as the eyes and decision makers for the Dungeoneer, whom they viewed on a screen which emerged from a chest or something like that. It made for incredible, if often frustrating, viewing.
Just keep going till we say stop.
Warning, team. You should have taken the magic lamp when you had the chance.
A port, if you can call it that, for popular British micros was therefore inevitable. The problem was it was far more frustrating than incredible, especially in 8-bit form. Released in 1987 by Activision, this is the closest many of us could get to the Knightmare experience. And it really was a nightmare. After the ear-piercing rendition of a TV tune, we find ourselves in a cell, with an old prisoner hobbling about, and one of the most upsetting navigational methods I've encountered. To start, movement is assigned to the 6, 7, 8 and 9 keys, which is almost perverted, but you can get used to it. But then we have a clunky, bumbling system of inventory and action selection, which really shits on your parade. Not only do we have all options here regardless of whether you can use them or not, I mean, I definitely don't want to open the old man, do I? But the system of addressing them is slow and clunky. You have to use the shift key to cycle through the first operator, then press enter, then do it again for the second. You can speed it up by typing the first letter, but when you've got seconds to lob rocks at enemies, it's really not ideal. But to be fair, none of that really matters because the vast majority of gamers never got out of this pissing room. I mean, there's no clue at all, apart from this dude, the occasional babbling nonsense from Treyguard, and whatever that is on the floor. Take anvil? No? Food? Ah, that other blob must be food. It's actually a rock, which instinctively I threw at the old man, but then you really are stuck, because we actually need him to progress. It turns out you need to give this chap your food and your water, and then ask him, and then he gives you a spade, which you can use to magically disappear through the floor in the next room along. Well, it's obvious when you put it like that, isn't it? Once you're through the floor, all manner of critters, bats and sword-wielding bastards appear to deal with, and you're gonna die a lot. A lot more than they do in the actual game show, even though that's pretty hard too. Each time you get hit, the candle on the right diminishes faster, which isn't quite as good as the face and skull of the real game, but it's still a feature of sorts. We have lots of familiar references to the first series of the show, such as faces appearing in walls and riddles which you have to solve. But really, it's a crock of crap. Watching the show is far more preferable. So, on to the next. How about Countdown? Another afternoon show, Channel 4 this time, and probably one many of us will associate with bunking off school. Either that or lazy university viewing. Now, here's a show that's still running today. Of course, we don't have Carol Vorderman anymore, or Richard What's-His-Face, but the premise is exactly the same. A bunch of people compete to solve maths problems and get the longest words, all before half the time on a clock runs out. I never did understand why they bothered having a whole clock.
Yes, Douglas.
So this game, it feels much easier to translate to the Spectrum. Published by Maxen Software in 1986, some 4 years after the series began airing, it was later re-released by TV Games in a double cassette box presentation, which is quite nice. We're then greeted with a frankly terrible version of the TV theme tune. We're then asked to enter our contestant names. It makes more sense if you have a friend to play with, but otherwise you can just go against the machine. This isn't really a concept you can go wrong with. We have the usual letters game where each player selects 9 random consonants and vowels and then tries to make a word using those selected letters. The longest word wins, although the software seems to come up with some pretty good words of its own, and that's thanks to a fairly extensive dictionary. Of course, it doesn't know every word, and so sometimes you're asked to confirm the words you've entered. 2-player, that's easy enough, and although you could cheat, especially playing against yourself, would there really be any point? See, Tenter, that's the name of someone who uses a tent. And wrecked is what happens when you drink too much. Like Knightmare, we're lacking some of the key visuals, in this instance the massive dirty grey clock. Instead we get a decreasing bar indicator, which isn't really the same. Anyway, onto the numbers round. Here we pick a selection of high and low number cards, and then have to reach the given target using our selection. This is quite nice, and you get plenty of space to present your formula, although you have to present each part in its entirety for the game to accept it. If the computer can do better, then it'll show you. If not, it won't. We then get more letters and numbers rounds before finishing on the countdown conundrum, where the first to buzz in gets a chance at the solution. It's countdown. It's not a bad implementation, but it is a little bland and dry to make it an entertaining computer experience. So, on to the next. The Krypton Factor. Yes, one of my childhood favourites. I mean, who wouldn't enjoy seeing random members of the public pushing themselves through obstacle courses and crashing planes in a flight simulator? Here's a series which started way back in 1977, originally presented by Gordon Burns, but continued really until 1995 with a brief reappearance in 2009. The concept was to test the physical stamina and mental attributes of these self-proclaimed hardy contestants, with the show's title a reference to Superman's home planet of Krypton. It's just, not all the contestants had Superman-like abilities, well, barely any of them, but that was all part of the charm. Each participant had their own colour and were put through rounds which differed over the years, but the most memorable for me being the standard question round, the observation round where they just watched a show, the physical ability course which put them through their paces, and naturally the flight simulator which changed between a helicopter and a commercial airline. They had to land it usually without crashing.
Just up above is the Hercules refueling tanker travelling at about 250 miles an hour.
Good, wholesome family viewing. So, how does the Spectrum version fare? Released in 1987 by Domark and TV Games, it benefits from another double-style cassette case and a decent instructional guide. This is a multi-load tape, so the initial section isn't too bad. We're greeted by the title screen and some pretty impressive music from the Spectrum's little beeper. Now, this is a game which was not received well by the gaming press of the time, and I think in some respects that's because from the off it actually feels like a TV show. Look, you even get to choose and edit your contestants, although I can't seem to edit the details like it says I should. But I still get to confirm the existing ones, so that's nice. But anyway, maybe this highlights the main question this video is asking. Do TV game shows actually translate well to computer game formats? Not so sure. The first round is mental agility. Here a series of numbers are presented. We simply have to recite them back to the computer in sequential order. Easy enough. Next we have the mental agility task of multi-loading the game. Oh, for flip's sake, what is the point? Once you've managed to load the next section, we have the observation round. Now this is where things start to go downhill. The concept is nice, it's like the TV show, but there's a lot of information here and it takes a lot of time to get through. Another slightly altered version then follows. You're then asked to identify two words which changed out of the story and choose the differences to the images. It's quite hard, I mean, 2 individual words. After a few attempts though, each with completely different stories and pictures, I did manage to get the words and most of the visual changes, so maybe this is some sort of early brain training situation. Next up is response. Here we're using a machine called an ergo buggy, and it's a little strange, but apparently something also used in the show, not that I can remember it. The premise is to cycle forward using your hands controlled by one pair of keys and your feet controlled by another pair. The problem is you have to tap them at different rates to keep the power bar in the middle of the indicators. I don't know, I quite like the challenge here. I mean, it would be better if I was playing this game multiplayer. Seems a bit pointless on my own, but this was quite interesting. After response comes physical agility, or even ability. This is done by assigning different amounts of power to your legs, arms, strength and stamina when necessary. It's a break from the daily Thompson or track and field method of running, that is for sure. Plus you don't ruin your Specky's keyboard in the process. The intelligence round is basically one of those cheap plastic block puzzles. Finally, general knowledge is answering questions, but then relying on you, or another player, to confirm whether you said the right answer or not. Thankfully, general knowledge is my special subject. The game is then over. Look, I won. Well, either I won or Che Guevara won, I'm pretty sure that's his face up there. Marxism rules! And so finally we move on to Run the Gauntlet. Now this is probably the least known show here, although it still had a decent run of 4 years between 1987 and 1991. Another ITV production, this one was a more intensive spectacle featuring 4 worldwide teams who battled to get through various rounds of endurance and skill. Given the intensity of the rounds, it was probably also the least accessible for general members of the public. But it's okay, because once again we have the ZX Spectrum version in all its glorious multicoloured finery. Published by Ocean Software and released in 1989, we get another double cassette box with a single cassette inside. Marvellous. This is a game I remember well from my childhood. My brother and I would spend hours trying to get to grips with the unforgiving nature of the game. It was a fruitless task, but at least we had some nice 128K music produced by the AY sound chip, which makes a welcome change. Like the Krypton Factor, this is a game consisting of multiple and quite different rounds. Once you've picked a team for you and your fellow players, it's on to the first randomly selected event. Although when I say random, it's very much still within the boundaries of the tape multi-load system. The different rounds are stored in order on the cassette, so sometimes you have to wait for a long time for each section to load as it skips over rounds it wasn't using on this pass. Here we have the water course. Sometimes you get a hovercraft here, sometimes boats. Here, it's jet skis. And good God, this is difficult! Even when you've worked out which way to go, bumping into something is like a toddler running full pelt into a bouncy castle. Devastation. After that you might get some off-roading, which is probably the easiest round on offer here, although you get different vehicles of different abilities, but it's still bloody frustrating. If you happen to knock into an opponent vehicle, then the opponent apparently continues without issue, whereas you fly off the track and spin wildly out of control. The same thing also happens if you drive on the grass. Must have those special anti-grass tyres fitted. But even so, this is the round I remember most fondly from youth. But playing it today reignited feelings of failure, which the game clearly instilled in me. Look at those other drivers making it seem easy, I can't even turn a bloody corner. There's also a running or climbing round where you get to control your power using a combination of fire and the left and right keys, and then somehow waggle yourself out of water hazards. There's a science to it, I'm sure, but clearly I haven't mastered it. You have to press the keys in a certain combination, I can't be bothered with that. If you play with friends, much like the Krypton Factor, you have to take turns, but really, that's where these games become more of their own thing. It's more exciting if you can bounce off a friend, a fellow competitor. By yourself, it's not a very good thing to play. Once you've completed all your rounds, then you get told how crap you are, and then you can try again. Or not. And that's our games. That is what it's like to take a well-loved 80s game show and squeeze it into the Spectrum. To take half an hour of entertainment and squash it into 48 kilobytes of sheer, unrelenting horror. probably the best title here is actually Countdown, but that's boring as hell. Run the Gauntlet isn't that bad, but then you're not going to play any of these games, even 2-player, when you have things like Spy vs Spy to get stuck into. So what have we learned? Well, I've learnt that playing interactive renditions of game shows I loved makes the game show taste a little sour in my mouth. I've learnt that I can't play these games for toffee, and I've learnt that I miss watching Knightmare on a Wednesday afternoon before dinner. That's pretty much it. I think what we've established here is that TV game shows are probably best left as TV game shows. Thanks for watching. Have a great evening.